What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So I've seen in the comments that many of you say you're getting tired of the Nintendo Switch Pro talk, the rumors, the reports, and all this. You know what? I hear you. So I've made the difficult decision to stop covering the Nintendo Switch Pro and instead cover the new Nintendo Switch just in time, by the way, because there is a report now coming out of Bloomberg talking about the hardware side of things. And we're going to go over that here today because it turns out Nate may have been right about this one. Also, we're going to talk about a new Pikmin game that's been announced. It's just not really the Pikmin game that a lot of people were hoping to see. And we also have to talk about Amazon once again, as it looks like they're starting up a new studio to take another shot at this game development thing. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're newer to this Bloomberg channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Monster Hunter Rise. It's out this Friday, and there's a lot of hype and excitement around this release for the Switch. We've actually played the game a couple of times now, with multiple demos releasing leading up to its release. And now it looks like reviews have gone live after the embargo lifted yesterday. And we can see that score here on Metacritic at an 87 currently, with 58 positive reviews, 3 mixed and 0 negative. And IGN Japan actually gave it a perfect 100. And there are several scores in the 90s as well, with some of them even saying it's the greatest Monster Hunter game they've ever played. I think the lowest score that I saw was IGN France at a 70. So yes, review scores look very good there. And I mentioned the hype factor. If we take a look at Video Games Chronicle here, Japanese CEO gives staff the day off to play Monster Hunter Rise. March 26th is Manhunt Day for workers at tech company Mark On. And apparently the reason for that is because so many people were calling out sick, of course, during the Monster Hunter Rise release day that they said, you know what, take the long weekend, play a ton of Monster Hunter, and then we'll see you back here Monday when we get back to work. And I kind of wish my boss back in the day was that understanding when Halo 3 came out. Either way, though, very exciting stuff here. The reviews look good. I'll be picking it up on Friday, and I'm sure we'll talk quite a bit about this game Saturday night on the podcast. Also, according to a new report, it looks like Discord might be looking around for a buyer. We can head over here to Ars Technica, where they say Microsoft is reportedly in the late stages of a $10 billion acquisition talks with Discord, a gaming-focused community chat platform, according to unnamed people familiar with the matter who spoke to Bloomberg. Epic Games and Amazon were also involved in acquisition talks previously, according to Bloomberg sources. VentureBeat also reported this week that Discord is exploring sale options with multiple parties. All right, so Microsoft appears to be the frontrunner based around a lot of reports currently hitting the internet, and this is an interesting one. Do we want Microsoft to buy Discord? Because it's kind of a flip of the coin, right? Mixer didn't work out at all. Skype had a slow start, but I believe it got integrated into Teams for Windows, if I'm not mistaken here, and people still do use Skype. But Discord, I guess Microsoft could use Discord and integrate it across their ecosystem and for the Xbox if they want, as an example, and that just be across the board there for PC, and maybe it'll improve the audio quality or the overall, I guess, just putting people together in rooms. Or maybe they just buy Discord and kind of leave it on its own. The other option apparently is that Discord could just go public and just kind of stay by themselves then. So I'm not really sure how this is going to shake out here, but we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens. Oh, and one game that I think would be really cool to see come over to the Switch from the 3DS is Kid Icarus Uprising. And I've occasionally seen some people say, you know what, that's something that should happen. And it looks like Sakurai has heard some of these requests, as we can see here on Twitter, where he says, 2012 Kid Icarus Uprising released today. We have received many requests for sequels and remakes, but it will be difficult. You know what? This is a game, when it released, it had some issues with its control scheme. It wasn't the most intuitive. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the game that came out and you need to stand for it, right? And it was a really good looking game when they first showed it. A lot of people thought it was for the Wii, but then they revealed that it was for the 3DS, and people had a hard time believing that those visuals were possible on something that you can fold up and put in your pocket. I mean, think about it this way. We're coming from the DS, then you see Kid Icarus Uprising, you're like, wow, that is impressive stuff there. And you know what? This is a game I would absolutely love to see get a second chance on a system as popular as the Switch. I mean, the extra exposure could even maybe start to get us into sequel territory with this series, and that would be awesome. And you know what? I would just like to see Sakurai do something other than Smash Bros. I think we're coming up on the end of the fighter passes, and yeah, maybe it's time he tries something else, like getting Kid Icarus Uprising over to the Switch, and then maybe working on a sequel. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the new Nintendo Switch report out of Bloomberg. We can head over here where they say Nintendo plans to adopt an upgraded NVIDIA chip with better graphics and processing for a new Switch model planned for the year-end shopping shopping season, according to people familiar with the matter. The new Switch iteration will support NVIDIA's Deep Learning Super Sampling, or DLSS, a novel rendering technology that uses artificial intelligence to deliver higher fidelity graphics more efficiently. That will allow the console, which is also set for an OLED display upgrade, to reproduce game visuals at 4K quality when plugged into a TV, said the people who asked not to be identified because the plan is not public. The US company's new chipset will also bring a better CPU and increased memory. DLSS support will require a new code to be added to games, so it'll primarily be used to improve graphics on upcoming titles, said the people, including multiple game developers. Okay, so looking at this, there's a few things here. A new chip, that is something that continues to be talked about here, and if you remember, Nate's been talking about this for a while now, specifically DLSS. Him and I had that talk a couple weekends ago on the channel about this new Nintendo Switch that was being rumored, and the idea of DLSS was said like 12 times in that video by Nate, so this basically just kind of lines up and corroborates what he's been saying for a while now. But NVIDIA creating a new chip on the low-powered side, right, for their Tegra line, basically, that will be capable of DLSS, which I would assume would be their newest form, DLSS 2.0, is interesting because they would fit tensor cores onto a smaller Tegra chip. I assume it's like the minimum amount that they need to do what Nintendo needs here, but still, that's interesting to see NVIDIA push the Tegra along in that direction. And who knows, it's something that I guess could also end up in their Shield TV as well, which is something they've done with the previous chip, Mariko, that went into the Switch. Now, they also mentioned memory. That could be, I assume, system memory, not necessarily the storage itself, the 32 gigabytes. It'll probably stay the same. But on the other side with RAM, that's something that's been brought up quite a bit with developers as being a bottleneck, whether it's memory bandwidth or just the amount of 4 gigabytes that the system currently has on board. They could double it. They could go up to 6 gigabytes instead. Hard to say which number they'll land on there, but if the memory bandwidth will at least increase, possibly double, that would be a large improvement from the current Switch now. And then on the other side, they talk about having to go back and code for games in general to take advantage of DLSS with Nintendo and this new Switch. And that means that if we want to see something like Breath of the Wild, the first one, take advantage of DLSS, I assume a patch would have to be pushed out there. And that's gonna be obviously dependent on if Nintendo wants to do that. And that could also mean that some games will just benefit from a smoother frame rate at least. It's something we saw with the new 3DS when that came out. Certain games like Smash Brothers had much better load times on that one than the older 3DS. So everything that's being said here sounds interesting and it sounds very plausible. The other part that came up was about price, and this is an interesting one because they are still seeing, or at least believing, it could be $350 to $400. And people are concerned because they're like, Nintendo's never done anything above $350. They had like a Wii U system bundle that was $350, but like not $400. Could Nintendo push this thing to $400? I think they can, mostly because the Switch had been selling for $400 for the last year by resellers anyway. Like, people, I think, are getting into the mindset now of these $500 systems on store shelves for the Series X and the PS5. Well, if this new Nintendo Switch shows up next to it, and it also has a little 4K badge on the box, I'm gonna tell you now, consumers are gonna have a hard time telling the difference necessarily. Like, okay, this one's 4K and this one's 4K. What's the exact difference here other than this one lets me also take it on the go? Seriously, mainstream consumers look at the outside of the box, see the 4K badging, and they kind of put them together and say, oh, okay, these are pretty comparable. Basically, it's gonna come down to the marketing that Nintendo does, and if they mess it up, then they would have a problem. But if they can at least really tell people why this system costs $400 and why you would want to upgrade to it, I think they would have something here. But again, this is a report out of Bloomberg, and I guess we would have to see whenever Nintendo wants to tell us about this thing, which would probably be 2 or 3 months before it comes out. So if it comes out in October, they'll tell us about it in July. And hey, as soon as it goes into production, the image will probably leak online, because it did for the Switch Mini at the time, which we called it that, and then it became the Switch Lite. Remember that image? It showed up online. It was the back of the turquoise one, and no one believed it, and that was actually an image of it in the factory. So we'll keep an eye on this situation as we head into the summer. Next up, let's talk about the big announcement from Nintendo for Pikmin 4 mobile. We can head over here to Twitter, where Nintendo America says, what would it be like to have a more fun walking experience surrounded by Pikmin in a new mobile app developed by Niantic Labs and Nintendo coming later in 2021? Explore the real world and create memories with your Pikmin friends. You can pre-register there. I did so because I have no idea what they're gonna do with this game or this experience exactly. I guess you walk around with Pikmin and they pick stuff up on the ground as you're walking around through like augmented reality. And like, that's kind of it. Do you collect Pikmin? Do you level them up? Do you raise them? Do you go on adventures and like you get attacked by monsters? Like in the game itself, I guess. I mean, I think people are happy to at least see like Nintendo do something new with Pikmin, because Pikmin 3, of course, then came up to the Switch and everyone's been asking for Pikmin 4. But if you think about it this way, with this game, this potentially could get more people aware of the Pikmin franchise. It's not like a huge franchise for Nintendo or anything, but moving it over to cell phones could maybe get some more people involved here because they'll see Nintendo's name on it, or maybe not, because we saw what happened with Dr. Mario. Does anyone play Dr. Mario still on mobile phones? I mean, I don't really see anyone talk about Mario Kart Tour anymore on phones. So really, some of these games that Nintendo comes up with are really good, like Pokemon Go, or just completely forgotten about, like I said, like Dr. Mario. So I am hoping that this is at least an interesting idea, because if it can kind of get up to where Animal Crossing is now on phones, that would be a big success for Nintendo with the Pikmin franchise. And then, yes, I'm sure they will eventually move in to Pikmin 4. This is just more of something they want to try as they continue to push into the mobile phone market with these different games and AR experiences. So we'll see what happens here, and hey, if I get into it, I'll let you guys know exactly what this game is. Next up, let's talk about Amazon and a new studio that they have formed. We can head over here. This is The Verge saying Amazon is illustrating its commitment to game development with a new studio opening. Despite its struggles to make a hit game in recent years, the company on Tuesday announced the new studio's Montreal-based team, which will create original AAA games with an initial focus on a new online multiplayer title. The new studio will be led by industry veterans who worked on Ubisoft's Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Amazon Games' Montreal studio is its fourth studio, with 3 other locations based in Seattle, San Diego, and Orange County. And I figured they would just go after another multiplayer game, like a big multiplayer style game is, I think, what a lot of these bigger companies want. They want a game that they can create once and then just build on it forever, as long as possible. They want the next Fortnite, right? That's really what they want to create and run. They don't want to create, I don't say smaller experiences, because when you see some of these big time single player games, it takes a lot to build them. But I think Amazon is looking at the live services as what they want to really get into, because that is what would give them their best return on investment. And let's be real, we saw what happened with Google. They got impatient, they moved along with their first-party studios closing down, and I think Amazon is looking at something similar here. Look, we got to make this multiplayer game that we can bring in a large audience to and keep them interested in, and of course, microtransactions and all of this, monthly active users, everything there. So it is kind of a shame to see that they're just going after the multiplayer online trend, but we'll see what they come up with, I guess, right? Just Amazon's track record hasn't been great here. I mean, they were the first, it was the first time I've ever seen a game come out of beta or alpha and then go back in the closed alpha, and they had to take it down, and then that's gone now with Crucible. So here's hoping the studio has better luck. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a new showcase we can look forward to next month. This one from Capcom, we can head over here. This is Resident Evil April Showcase. First up, we have a major announcement to kick things off. A new Resident Evil Showcase will be dropping this April. We don't want to spoil any surprises, so we'll leave it to all of you to speculate on what this upcoming presentation might contain. If you're itching for tasty new info, keep an eye on Resident Evil's social channels and all of this. All right, cool. So a Resident Evil Showcase next month. I think obviously they'll probably talk more about Resident Evil Village. That's going to be their big release, and all of this coming up the following month. But there's been a lot of talks around this Switch exclusive Resident Evil game, or timed exclusives. Talked about a new Revelations game, maybe that turned into something else. And remember, there's still the talk about, what could we see something with Resident Evil 4 Remake? Could they finally unveil that? I don't think they'll do anything with that, because it sounded like they were already having some conflicting ideas in development with that one there. But I do think this would be a great time to unveil this new Revelation style game for the Switch, and who knows, maybe we're going to talk more about their online game as well, and maybe throw some extra content into Village. A lot of possibilities here, and it's always exciting to hear more about what we could get from the Resident Evil franchise, especially with how things like Resident Evil 2 Remake, and yeah, even Resident Evil 3 Remake, I know that was a step down from 2, but it was still very, very good. And Village is looking awesome so far. So we'll see, I guess, what they have for us next month. Exciting stuff, though, for Resident Evil fans. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, do you prefer buying games digitally or physically? 34% of you said digitally is just more convenient. 66% of you said physically. I like to build a collection on my shelf. Okay, so 2/3 physically, 1/3 digitally. That's actually a little more towards the physical side than I thought we would see here, because we are seeing more and more companies say, yeah, we're getting like 50-50 with the digital physical split. But I assume a lot of you are also into collecting like I am, as we do those GameCube videos and all of this. But I do think we are on the road, yes, to digital games just taking over completely and physical going away. I don't know if this is going to be the last generation that we see physical games with like the PS5 and the Series X. It is telling, though, that we have 2 digital consoles at launch, and no one's really made a big deal about that at all. I just think the newer generation is more or less embracing the digital side of things. And when we hear EA say that they're selling more games digitally outright over the last like year or two, I think we're going to get there eventually. And I mean, if you look at the Switch, it's way more convenient to have digital games on it, isn't it? Because then you don't have to carry around all of these small cartridges that at times are worth $60 a piece, that are easy to lose, misplace, and all of this. Whereas if you lose your SD card that has all the games, you just re-download them when you get a new SD card and you get home with it. But we'll see. I might run this poll again in like a year, and then we'll see if that shifts at all. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Mark saying, therein lies the problem with digital games. You pay for them, but you only own them for as long as the publisher says you own them. This will only get worse. Long live physical media. This is referring to the potential with the report of the PS3, the PSP, and the Vita stores all being shut down in a couple of months. And you know what? You make a good point. I'm looking at the whole digital side of things, and people think they own the games, but they technically don't really. I mean, yes, you own the rights to play the game, but you don't own the game like you do if you have it physically in front of you. And really, there's a thin line in terms of difference between owning a digital game and owning a license to stream the game through something like Stadia. There's a lot of emphasis on the concerns around a streaming future, but when you own something digitally, you're right, it can be taken away. It can be taken off the store. We always question, can we re-download it? That's a whole thing. So I don't know, the whole game preservation thing is something that's going to come up quite a bit now over the next couple of years as we work towards this all-digital future that I do think is inevitable. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There's this new Nintendo Switch, a new chip from NVIDIA that's capable of DLSS. They're going to have more RAM on board, the whole thing, OLED display. Do you think that's coming out this year, this holiday? Let me know about all of that once again down below. And then what about a new Pikmin game, but on mobile phones? Were you disappointed when you saw that, or are you really interested and curious as to what they can come up with? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.